Hi, I'm Senator Cynthia Lummis, and I am chairman of the Senate Western Caucus. And here today, I am so pleased to have a fellow Wyoming leader in the area of fish and wildlife, and that is now Brian Nesvik, former director of the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission, who now is the head of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for President Trump. Welcome to our podcast, and thanks for joining us.
Yes, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, and I sure appreciate your invitation. And we have a lot of common issues that we've worked on over many years, and it'll be good to have a discussion about a lot of those issues here today.
Well, we have finally Mr. Common Sense heading the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so let's get right into it. First of all, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I grew up in Wyoming. I wasn't born there. I moved there when I was 6 months old. So my parents were in college in South Dakota when I was born, but then I've never known anything but Wyoming. So I am very blessed to have grown up in the greatest state in the nation. So had an opportunity at a young age to decide that I really liked the outdoors and I wanted to be a game warden, and I set my focus on that and was able to do that. I also wanted to be a soldier, and so I started a dual career when I was 17 when I enlisted into the Wyoming Army National Guard and worked my way up through the ranks in both. Had the opportunity to work all over Wyoming as a game warden, and then was eventually the chief game warden. And then Governor Mark Gordon appointed me in 2019 when he was elected to be the director of the Wyoming Game and Fish, and then simultaneously in my military career, I had the opportunity to work my way up through the ranks, do a couple combat deployments, and served as the commanding general of the Army National Guard, the assistant adjutant general, and retired from that in 21, I believe it was, and then retired from Wyoming Game and Fish in 24. And then very shortly after that, I went home to my wife's longtime 100-plus year family ranch, and we had lots of plans, and we're doing lots of good work on the ranch, and this job kind of came and found me. But it was an incredible opportunity to do really good stuff for certainly my folks that I care about in Wyoming, but also for our entire country.
So your wife's back on the ranch calving right now.
She is.
And here you are ensconced in Washington, D.C., over at the Department of the Interior. Yeah. So give us an idea about what was the culture like at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service when you arrived?
Well, the first thing I would say is that folks, there was a definite sense amongst those folks, the career employees that had been there for the previous administration and even before that, of needing direction. Folks wanted to know where we were headed, what our expectations were. There was tepid, I would say, tepid enthusiasm and optimism about my showing up. I, in the past, have certainly had disagreements with the Fish and Wildlife Service and have talked very publicly about some of my criticisms. But there was, the folks in the service were actually excited to have somebody that had a wildlife background show up. Hadn't had that in quite some time. And so, the other thing that was interesting was I learned that in the last administration, there was such a focus on things that I really had to scratch my head, wondering why in wildlife conservation, wildlife management, the Fish and Wildlife Service was focused on things like climate change, which the service has absolutely no ability to influence, and all of this DEI stuff. And, regardless of people's philosophies on those issues, I didn't understand why in the world we had invested so much personnel time, money, and energy into those issues when the core mission provided by the law for the Fish and Wildlife Service has nothing to do with that stuff.
So, yeah, and I've heard that from other administrators who've gone in. They got away from the job of following the law to the job of creating policy and promoting personnel that were oriented towards emphasis on DEI, which way out of the statutory direction that the Congress gives to the agency. So I'm so pleased that you chose to return to the law. How did you prioritize your efforts to refocus on your legal obligations as the director?
So, first thing that I felt was really important, like I said, the service wanted some direction and some expectations. So I very early on took an opportunity to talk to basically every employee that wanted to listen in the entire service, provide them with what my vision was for the service and what our priorities were going to be. That was number one. Folks got to know, you got to have people to do the work, and they got to know what the expectations are if you're going to get anything done. I think the next thing we really looked hard at was, what are those things that are going to take some time because of process that we need to get done as early, so that we can cross the finish line during this administration. We only have a short amount of time here. And so we looked at things like overly regulatory burdensome items that really needed to be addressed. ESA reform through regulation was really important.
Well, that is something that I've been hoping for a very long time. As you know, grizzly bears, huge issue in Wyoming. Wolves, another huge issue that is just unresolved after many, many years. The plan for recovery for grizzlies that existed at the turn of the last century was actually fulfilled, and then the goalpost kept moving. How does the goalpost move for recovery?
Well, I think, if you look back at when grizzly bears were delisted, each time they've been delisted in the Yellowstone ecosystem 2 different times. As you pointed out, back in 2002, 2003, the bear population was recovered by all of the scientific criteria. But each time they were delisted, there was a lawsuit, and the decision was vacated. And so each time recovery criteria were changed and the goalposts moved, the recovery criteria became, the number of bears required to meet recovery would increase, not necessarily based on any science, but based on some court decision. And then there would be another delisting effort, and it would be challenged in court and vacated, and we would move the goalposts again. And that's how over time those recovery criteria have continued to change, and not based on science.
So here you and I are. I'm in the legislative branch, you're in the executive branch. And in the area of recovery of species, the science is set aside, and the judges are put in charge. How can we change that?
Well, I tell you that certainly my expertise and roles and responsibilities are in the executive branch. I think there's not a lot that the executive branch probably can do to address that. I think most of those are legislative solutions, because the way that these laws like the Endangered Species Act is being interpreted and then eventually implemented is dictated by law. So the only way to really change that is through the law.
One of the ideas that I've heard is the possibility of, once there's a final recovery decision made at your level, to allow it to stand for 5 years. And so we can see whether the science that was used to inform your delisting decision was accurate as a measure of protecting the recovery in the long term. Is that something you could support?
Absolutely, and I'll take it a little further. You're exactly right in being able to evaluate the science that was used to inform the decision, but also the whole intent of the Endangered Species Act is, okay, you make a determination that they're threatened or endangered, and then you work to recover them, and then you celebrate success and you delist them when they're recovered, and you turn the management, this is the key part, you turn the management over to the state. And the states develop management plans for species before they come off the list. That's part of the delisting process. And so if you don't give the states any time at all to prove that their management plan is going to work, because of litigation, this is just turns into this big cycle of not really fully implementing the intent of the Endangered Species Act. The states, I think you would find in most cases, are going to show, and I think in all cases are going to show that within that 5-year time frame that you're talking about, their management plan works and species continue to stay recovered and actually thrive.
Well, I think that's something worth pursuing. I know you're very focused on identifying species that really have met recovery goals and delisting them. How are you going about that?
So I've asked the team to look hard at providing me a list of species that just need a little nudge, just need a little bit of effort and time and human capital, basically, to push them over the edge to celebrate that success and delist them. We've identified 60-ish species that we think are in that category, and we're going to use this next couple of years. We found some money and some resources, and we're going to work towards getting those species off the list. I think it's important.
Well, I do too. I think, in fact, I even have a bill that would do nothing other than change the name of the Endangered Species Act to the Endangered Species Recovery Act. By changing the name, I'm hoping to call attention to the desire for recovery, that should be the goal, not to just list and then leave species on the endangered list forever, but to actually put the effort behind recovering them and then delisting them once they're recovered. So the focus then can turn to species that are either threatened or endangered. I'm so grateful you're willing to do this job. I know that you were hoping to retire and spend more time in Wyoming. But thanks for taking an additional 2.5 years with President Trump and answering his call to serve him in this capacity. The entire Department of the Interior, and I assume this applies to you too, is making a fabulous effort this year to celebrate the nation's 250th anniversary. Anything you're involved in there?
Yeah, certainly. We've got multiple different events. There's a lot of events all over this country. There's flags across America that we're participating in, where we're taking flags and touring them around all of our different facilities. There's, certainly we're very supportive of Secretary Burgum's F-250 event with the Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Library. Certainly there will be a lot of activities around D.C. We've also been participating in providing and developing a list of 250 really cool improvement projects that can occur, habitat projects that can occur on wildlife refuges to celebrate the 250th anniversary, and those will be happening. So there's a lot going on in D.C., but it's really worth it when you think about how lucky we all are to be able to celebrate this anniversary and to have the country that we have.
Director, it's so great to have you on our Western Caucus podcast. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
And thanks for wearing your Wyoming tie and your Wyoming pin. Yes. Go Pokes.
Go Pokes.
On behalf of the Senate Western Caucus, I'm Cynthia Lummis with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Director Brian Nesvik. Thanks for tuning in.